I didn't mean to pick it up. It was just a scrap of paper, lying in the gutter, glowing faintly under neon light. The rain made it shine like a fish scale pressed flat on the asphalt. I bent down and touched it. Letters rose like tiny sparks across the surface. One night only, Midnight Circus. Admission is soul. I laughed under my breath, trying to dismiss it. But the ink pulsed warm against my skin like a quiet heartbeat. My fingers closed tighter around the ticket, refusing to let go. The street was empty, and the rain had stopped as if someone cut a wire. Yet I was still soaked, a cold trail slipping down my spine. The silence felt wrong, too complete. Drop it, I told myself, but the paper thumped like a tiny drum in my palms, steady and sure. Somewhere far away, a calliope curled around the night like a smile you couldn't trust. A shop window caught my reflection, but it lagged behind. Eyes too quick and mouth too slow, a fraction out of step. When I waved, it didn't. Footsteps echoed behind me. I turned. Nobody. The sidewalk rippled like cloth. Neon bent and buzzed low, and the whole world tilted by a breath while my stomach tilted more. I shoved the ticket into my pocket, felt the fabric go strangely deep, like a throat swallowing my hand, and yanked it free. Its corner peeked out like a tongue. I almost laughed. I didn't. A moth circled overhead, stitching letters in the air with dust, and when it landed on the ticket, it stroked the word midnight and made it glitter. Then it flew toward the alley, and I followed. The alley dissolved. Bricks melted into fabric. Roofs stretched into ropes. Posters peeled into banners. Sand hissed pink and silver beneath my shoes, each step feeling practiced, rehearsed by a version of me I didn't remember being. Ahead, a tent inhaled the sky, drank the clouds, and exhaled stars. Stripes crawled like veins, ropes shifted and coiled. The tent was alive, and it was waiting. Children ran across the sand in costumes faded by a sun I could not see. They chased white moths that spelled names in the air. One spelled mine. I lifted a hand, then froze. A clock leaned against the ropes and ticked backward while its numbers vanished. The ticks stayed and said yes, while the talk said now. Heat rose from an old memory when I reached for it, a lie I told at 8, and I pulled back. She stood at the entrance. The ringmaster, silver eyes, unblinking, coat like wet film, gloves bone white, a still smile hidden under the hat shadow. She raised one finger. This way. Her eyes didn't reflect the tent, they reflected me. 16 laughing too loud, and 19 silent while choices chose me, now holding the ticket like a shield or maybe a key. My throat closed and words died unspoken. She tilted her head, tying the air into a knot. The moths froze, the sand hushed, and the tent leaned closer. I stepped forward, and her shadow touched me first, warm at my ankles, welcoming without a word. The canvas exhaled a sigh and opened. Scents drifted out. Dust, rope, sugar, old film. Copper touched my tongue as I swallowed. I thought of leaving, but leaving had nowhere to stand. The field had vanished. Only tent. Only her. The children were gone. The clock ticked somewhere inside my chest. I pressed the spot. Nothing. I read the ticket again. One night only. Midnight Circus. Admission is soul. The word weighed more than paper and pressed against my pulse. I lifted my chin and met her eyes. Nodded once. She turned her palm up, and I set the ticket there. Watched her glove drink the damp edge. One tap, a low hum like storm wire, and she gave it back. Keep it. She parted the canvas. Inside came a slow organ, a bell thin as glass, a drum steady as breath, each sound threading into my lungs. I crossed the seam of air and fabric. It brushed my skin like cool water. Scared, tense, shadows breathed as one. No faces, no people, only presence. A spotlight swung and dust spun in the beam. My name stitched itself on a chair. I didn't sit. I held the ticket tight. She leaned close, her voice crawling into my skull. Which frightens you more? Truth. Reflective. Soft. The audience hushed. The music held its breath, and the show began while none of us moved. I was not late and not early. I was exact. I stepped forward. The ring awaited, and the night folded into a circle. I entered. The corridor behind the ring stretched longer than it looked. Doors lined the sides, wood warped, glass fogged, handles warm to the touch. Each door carried a faint whisper of a memory, like breath on a mirror. I opened one and found a kitchen that was not mine. Sunlight pooled on the floor like honey. A radio murmured, and a voice said my name with kindness I hadn't earned. I reached for the voice, and it cut off like tape. Another door revealed a classroom where I laughed too loud, chasing approval like a balloon slipping from fingers, and the laughter echoed a beat too long. I closed it gently, as if it could bruise. A third door breathed when I touched it. The air smelled like a storm, and a hallway led to a mirror. No, a window. No, a film screen. It showed me standing where I stood, watching myself watch myself. I waved, and my other hand waved late, and then early, and then not at all, as if time were a coat I couldn't put on straight. The image smiled before I did. I turned away and kept walking. The doors multiplied until they no longer fit the walls, hanging in the air like polite demands. A sign overhead read, "Final Act, Audience of One." I pushed through a canvas flap and stepped into a backstage of bone and steel. Gears gnawed at air. Belts purred, cables pulsed with light. The circus ran on attention. Gasps turned gears. Laughter pressed levers. Applause threw sparks across the gap between tasks. Even silence had weight and fed the flywheel. A dial marked ME glowed at center stage of the mechanism. Wires kissed my wrist. The pulse in the wheel took my beat and spun faster, faster. A scoreboard I couldn't see clicked higher with each breath. Somewhere above, moths tapped glass. I tried to shut it down. I pulled a belt until it split, but the cut curled into a smile. I kicked a socket and it leaned closer like a pet. I looked for a master switch and found only a mirror. Scared, the mirror wore my face and looked relieved to be me. When I raised a hand, it reached for the switch I couldn't see and stopped at almost like a word I never said out loud. It mouthed now. I mouthed no, and the machine laughed in a rhythm too polite to be kind. The belt sang my first false promise, and the gears answered with applause. I stepped back from the mirror, and it stepped forward from me. Scared, then it walked out of the glass. And the room didn't change to fit two of me. I did the changing. The other me touched the dial marked ME, and turned it halfway, as if we shared custody of our wanting. Astonished, light spilled like coins, the backstage brightened, shadows thinned, and somewhere the crowd of silhouettes inhaled in one slow ribbon. I felt taller and smaller at once. Enough, I said, to me and the machine and the waiting audience. The word arrived late and landed early, like a trapeze swing with no partner. I reached for the dial, and the other me closed my hand. For a breath we matched, then I let go, and the other me dissolved back into glass like a good idea that did not want the work. The dial hummed down to almost. I followed a thin stair to a market strung with paper lamps. Stalls displayed masks labeled in small, careful letters. Joy, anger, wisdom, enough, never enough, and one simply called tomorrow. No one spoke, yet the air felt crowded. A child handed me a mirror the size of a postcard. Inside it, every face I'd ever worn waited and did not argue. I dropped it on purpose. It did not shatter. Truth doesn't. The ringmaster appeared beside the stall, her reflection arriving before she did. She nodded at the masks like a teacher proud of tidy work. "You're late for your final act," she said. I stood in a slice of light and felt it warm my palms like a small private dawn. The light was in my hands now, not over me. When I opened my mouth, silence came out well-dressed and unhelpful. I walked into a corridor of mirrors. Each reflection named me something I had been: liar, lover, coward, creator, almost. Again, enough. I smashed one and watched a new one grow in the crack like frost. I screamed, and 100 versions of my mouth screamed back. Not mockery echo, practice, invitation. I let the sound burn down to a small, clean ember. The last mirror showed a door with no handle, and my hand already on it. I pushed and stepped through into sand under stars for a ceiling. The arena without walls. The ringmaster waited across the ring. My memory stood behind her like a patient chorus. 8 and lying to be liked, 16 and laughing too loud, 19 and letting the coin choose heads or tails for me. They did not accuse, they performed. We did not fight with fists. We traded names. She called me stories I wasn't proud of. Then I called them mine. One by one, I accepted them. One by one, I let them go. She bowed, and it felt like a page turning. "You've learned the act," she said, and the sand remembered every footstep we had not taken. "Now the tent is yours." She vanished like a choice made cleanly. The stars shuffled into new maps, and the ring widened until the edge got shy and hid. The silence that followed did not want to be filled, so I listened. Behind the nearest curtain, a paper tore. The tent skin rippled, colors bled toward the seam, and the canvas remembered it had once been a sail. I pulled it back and found a child's drawing. The circus, drawn with patient crayons. The tent bigger than the moon. My name on the back in careful letters that wanted to be braver. I was the creator, always, and the destroyer. I crushed the paper and thought of forgiveness like a good coat hanging by the door. I put it on and it fit. Then I folded the paper open again. The drawing did not crease where I had closed it. It looked at me unbroken. Outside, ropes snapped like shy thunder. The big top sagged as if it exhaled the wrong air, and the silhouettes rustled without moving. The clock ticked in my chest and also backstage, and also nowhere. I walked the ring and felt the sand answer underfoot. Each grain knew my weight before I set it down and had time to be ready for me. A moth landed on my shoulder and did not spell anything at all. It stayed. I spoke to the tent the way you speak to an animal that may be larger than your plan. "We're done with tricks," I said. "We'll try truth." The organ answered with a single note that sounded like yes in a different language. I opened every flap and let the night blow through. The audience of silhouettes thinned to outlines of weather, then to polite darkness. The tent did not object. It stretched. I set the child's drawing its center ring. I placed the ticket on top. I put my palm over both, until the heat of my hand admitted me to the moment. "One night only," I said aloud to hear how many nights it meant. The ringmaster's hat lay where she had not been a moment before. When I lifted it, a small mirror looked up from the crown and showed my face the way water does, asking me to be gentler. I was. "Which frightens you more?" I asked the empty seats. "Truth or being forgotten?" The seats considered and didn't say. I tried on a smile and found that it fit different now, like a pair of shoes broken in by someone who liked to walk. I walked, and the tent followed like a patient dog. Outside the big top, dawn rehearsed behind the clouds. Moths dimmed to soft commas. The clock rested its hands in its lap. I stood where the alley had once been and watched the city on pause. The rain remembered itself and returned with manners. Neon straightened its back, footsteps belonged to people again. The ticket warmed one last time in my pocket like a promise that knew the terms. I did not tear it up. I did not frame it. I kept it the way you keep a hard lesson near enough to guide, far enough not to sting. "One night only," I said again, and meant tonight whenever I needed it. A child walked down the street with a look like the sky had tried something and gotten away with it. A ticket fluttered to her feet and waited as if patience were a game you could win. She picked it up. "Midnight Circus," she read, and the moth on my shoulder set its wings like a bookmark and stayed. Somewhere a tent inhaled. I nodded to the air and to whatever watched with kindness I didn't fully trust. I turned toward the day the way a page turns toward the next line. I had work. I had the ring. I had the truth and what it cost. If ever I forgot, there would be moths to spell the names I needed, and a mirror to arrive before I did. There would be a clock to tick yes and talk now. There would be a chair with my name I did not have to sit in to own. There would be a door with no handle that opened when I used my hand to make one. The circus did not end. It changed custody. The tent was mine the way a story is mine when I tell it right. I would open the flap for the next child and show her where to stand so the light warmed her palms. The act is learning, I would say. The trick is acceptance. And if she asked about the price, I would show her the ticket and say the word soul kindly, because sometimes the same word means music. Night leaned into morning. The ring made a circle no wall could hold. The sand remembered our steps and kept them for later, not as evidence, but as choreography. I breathed and did not write it down because living would be the record. When the organ spoke again, it used my breath. When the bell rang, it used my pause. When the drum counted, it borrowed my walk. The show would be honest, or it would not go on. I locked the dial at almost and threw away the key to more. I left enough where it belonged inside the work, not on the scoreboard. The machine below backstage idled and learned a new job listening. The silhouettes returned at dusk with faces on. They brought stories and left lighter. They asked small questions that fit in the pocket like clean stones. I handed back moth-light answers and sand-slow truths. On certain nights, I held the child's drawing up to my ear and heard paper remember being tree. I laughed like a person who knows why and does not hurry to explain. The ringmaster's hat fit my head like a borrowed courage. Once the mirror tried to arrive before me again, I let it. We stood together until it wanted to be glass more than me. I waved first and it followed on time. If you come, you will not sit where your name is sewn. You will sew it while you stand and then decide whether to sit. I will not count how long you take. When the question returns, truth or being forgotten, I will answer truth, and I will forget only what keeps me from it. The tent will approve with a sound you feel and can't spell. And if a ticket ever finds your feet in the rain, bend carefully. There is a drum in the paper and a moth somewhere with your name in its dust. Pick it up. One night only never meant once. It meant only tonight. Only the next honest step. Only the ring you agree to enter. When you do, the audience of one will stand and breathe with you. Determined, I will be there with the lights in my hands and the sand under your shoes and the clock set to yes. The rest we will build together, without tricks, with acceptance, with music the ticket meant. Curtain falls, not to end, just to teach the sky how to blink. The tent inhales, the city exhales, and between them, we tell it right.